Thank you so much, Jen. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. Another session here. Greetings from, I'm in Germany today, but thrilled after really putting a dent in Germany's beer stocks over the last few days. Just absolutely thrilled to spend some time with some sparkling wines. We do have a lot to cover today in an hour, and so we're going to go quick and dirty here. Thrilled to be joined by my friend Megan Frank. Could not ask for a better co-host for this session in particular. And so I am going to share my screen, get our slides up, and we will get started. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see that all right. And so yeah, sparkling wine, deeply rooted in New York State history. And so I think it really just has a strong foothold in both our past and our future. It is produced in all of the state's major AVAs, and these wines are across all methods of production. They have received national and international acclaim from all corners of the trade and media, and we believe the potential of these styles to be infinite. With the flight today, we hope to show varying styles, approaches, terroir, and flavors that make New York State wines, New York State sparkling wine, so special. And so today's 60-minute course will feature, again, 5 wines, and we've got some really good ones. I'm thrilled with these wines. And so here we go. We've got just a quick opportunity to reinforce the state geography in our major regions. We are working with cool climate viticultural areas that all but guarantee the high acid levels that go hand in hand with premium sparkling wine production. I think that sparkling wine makes for just a really wonderful opportunities for our winemakers to work with the kind of extreme vintage variation that we experience here across New York State. And so, again, top winemakers making top sparkling wines. Bodies of water, again, contributing to these cool climates and our temperature moderating abilities across most of our major regions. So moving on, sparkling wine production has a long history in New York State. I love these images that we have here. I think the idea of New York State champagne just makes me smile, and it probably makes some French people stay up at night. But anyway, we've got some kind of historical points I'll touch on here, and we're going to bring Megan in because her family's contribution comes into play as well. So the Pleasant Valley Wine Company, popularly known as Great Western Winery, which was one of its leading brands, was founded in Hammondsport, which is at the base of Keuka Lake in 1860. It became U.S. bonded winery #1 and quickly established an international reputation for sparkling wines and really put Finger Lakes on the map. In 1863, they won a gold medal at the Vienna Exposition, and this was for a sparkling catawba. And this inspired growth in the wine industry throughout the Finger Lakes in New York State through the late 1880s. By 1865, just a couple of years later, Pleasant Valley Wine Company was producing about 20,000 bottles of sparkling wine champagne. So throughout the rest of the 19th century, sparkling dessert and table wines won major awards at several European competitions, fueling interest and growth. Now, while most wineries closed due to prohibition, a few did adapt, taking advantage of loopholes in the laws, including Pleasant Valley, Taylor, and Widmer. Under pressure, eventually the U.S. government passed changes, including the amusing notion that all sparkling wine could be sold for sacramental purposes. And so, it really, there was a big kind of dip then, in terms of our kind of production and our reach with sparkling wine. But again, this kind of was built into our DNA, and a lot of these major brands that took us from the Prohibition era into the kind of modern era that we understand now. This was the through line, the sparkling wines for us. And so, let's see here. I'm going to jump ahead in my notes. No, fantastic. So, today we have some really wonderful accolades and media buzz around our sparkling wines. I think it's fantastic. In a February 2022 article for JancesRobinson.com, our friend Elaine Chukan Brown suggests that sparkling wine could be the key to shifting New York's perception of being value-focused to a region producing prestige wines. The article further highlights the many New York producers' dedication to sustainability, noting the use of solar power and lighter glass bottles, both pursuits significantly reducing carbon footprint. We'll, of course, end at the very end of the session with a little shout out to our sustainability efforts, but it applies to our sparkling wine production as well, and there's opportunities to continue to be better. Sparkling wine production, again, deeply rooted. It makes sense to look to historical methods beyond the traditional champagne method sparklings. And so there's just so much experimentation currently in applying method ancestral or petnat methods to an enormous range of varieties, and so that the flavors and the characteristics of our petnats vary widely. Again, it's something that's really there's something for everyone in New York State when it comes to bubbles, and so examples from both hybrid, vinifera, and native varieties are all very well received. We do have, of course, our champagne-inspired cuvées from Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier, all the way to German sect-inspired Rieslings, and again, petnats from everything under the sun. And so there have been some really great milestones throughout our history that have done wonders for the perception of sparkling wines in New York State. And one of those is the Finger Lakes Dr. Constantine Frank Winery. They released their first traditional method sparkling wine from vinifera grapes in the Finger Lakes in 1985. And I'd love Megan to come on in and just tell us kind of more about this journey and tell us all about it.
Sure, Dan. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. It is morning here in the Finger Lakes region of New York. I'd love to speak about, the history. I know, Dan, in a previous slide, you had a label, Charles Fournier Brut, New York Champagne. And so this man actually ties in really closely with my great-grandfather, Constantine. And Charles was actually the director of winemaking at Veuve Clicquot in Champagne. He was from Champagne. And he was recruited by the owners of Gold Seal Winery, which no longer is in existence, but it was on Keuka Lake. And basically, this New York winery owner went to Champagne, recruited Charles to come to the Finger Lakes to make champagne. And Charles agreed. He thought he'd be here for a few years. And he ended up staying, the rest of his life. And so Charles was actually the first person that really believed in my great-grandfather, Constantine. So Constantine immigrated. He was from Ukraine. He had a PhD in viticulture and didn't speak any English. So he actually was able to speak French. He did speak French with Charles, and Charles actually hired him on the spot at a conference at the Geneva Experiment Station, which is still our kind of local sort of research institute in the area. And basically hired him on the spot to be director of research. And that is where the first sort of commercial vinifera trials occurred with Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Riesling. So it was this person from Champagne, that really helped my great-grandfather get his start. And then, a few years go by, Constantine started his own winery, but was really focused on still winemaking. He was an experimenter. He had over 66 different vinifera varieties. But it was his son, Willie, who was my grandfather, that really was bullish about sparkling wine. And, from 1985, our first vintage, until his passing in 2006, every bottle was Finger Lake champagne. So, it's traditional method. We still produce, the same kind of core items, but we'll be tasting one of our sparklings today. No longer call it Finger Lake Champagne; it's Méthode Champenois, sparkling wine. But yeah, that's kind of where we come into play, and it's just a really exciting category, and I'm thrilled to be able to taste some of these other really awesome sparkling wines. So.
Thanks, Megan. Megan, Was it well received from the outset, these sparkling wines? Were people so we're talking like at least like 1985, right? Kind
Yeah.
of vintage, right? And so there's kind of a bit of a break between, the kind of height of these brands, these kind of old school brands coming into you guys, being a farm winery, really, doing a premium production, right? Prestige wines, right?
Mhm.
How was the reception for this? Because it was a big investment for you guys too, I expect.
Yes, and it started very small, and we've grown, throughout the last 40 years, but very slowly. I would say, my grandfather was fighting against like this idea, like this credibility, and that's why he put champagne on the label. He would say it's the same grapes, it's the same method. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And he would just get in so many arguments, usually with Europeans, about, calling it champagne. And he was just trying to, elevate, the credibility of these wines and really say that they had a place on the world stage of sparkling wine production. So it's taken a long time, but I think we're we've definitely arrived, in a big way. And I'm excited that the perception seems to be very positive, today.
Yep. And so I expect you already had some Chardonnay and Pinot Noir planted. And did you guys add Pinot Meunier?
Yeah, so in the 1979, I believe, was our first planting of Pinot Meunier, and that was an important portion that my grandfather wanted to add to the sparkling portfolio. And we also were producing traditional method sparkling wine from Riesling as well. So really, those four grapes were the important ones for this program.
That's great. And today, are you working with any other varieties for your sparkling wines?
It's so funny you mentioned that, Dan. Yes, we have been experimenting the last few years with Pinot Gris, Gruner Veltliner, Riccatelli, Pinot Blanc. So we're releasing our first very small production of sparkling of those varieties in the coming months for Pinot Meunier and Pinot Gris, but then in a few more years for the Gruner Veltliner and the Riccatelli. So we've enjoyed experimenting with other varieties, and I think there's a lot that we have yet to kind of experiment with.
That's really exciting. As you tell me some of these grapes in my head, I'm thinking Cremant de Loire, I'm thinking Cremant de
Yes.
France, right? I'm thinking, the wonderful Austrian sparkling wines that I've had. I have not, I don't believe, not that I can think of, a sparkling Arcatzelli. And so that'll be another one that you guys can kind of plant that flag on, huh?
Yes, we're very excited. We had a big event this weekend, the Separavi Festival, where we had Georgian producers, come over, and it was really a wonderful celebration of sort of Georgian culture in the lens of the Finger Lakes. And our sparkling winemaker Eric disgorged 2 cases of the sparkling Riccatelli. It has been a year on lees, and it's beautiful. Like it's so aromatic, the acidity is there. It's just we're really excited about that wine.
Great. From a viticulture perspective, what do you guys, so one, how does vintage variation come into play? Are you able to have sparkling wine grapes every year? And how does that differ from particularly when you'd be, harvesting your grapes for still wines?
Sure. Yeah, no, I would say it's one of the, categories that is least impacted sort of by the variation that we see in our cool climate here because we're picking so early. And because of the variation of the season, we've started as early as, mid-August for the sparkling wines and as late as end of September. So there's a tremendous amount of variation depending on what the summer brings, in terms of the sort of the sun and sort of the heat and just really seeing, where the sugars are. But because we want, really high acid and lower sugar, in the grapes, we're harvesting early, which is a really nice kind of insurance policy because you're not quite sure what's going to happen, in the Finger Lakes. You could have, a sudden drop in temperature. You could have, hail. It's just a lot of rain, disease pressure. So it's a really nice kind of a great way to kind of harvest early. The one caveat to that would be if we have a difficult sort of winter, the our sort of Achilles heel here in the Finger Lakes is the winter. it can be very cold, anything under -10 Fahrenheit. You can have kind of severe bud damage, and that's especially true for Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Chardonnay. These varieties, you can have sort of a reduction in buds, and then that would lead to a reduction in kind of fruit. And that's something we saw in 2022, unfortunately. So that was a much smaller harvest, but very good quality. So
Excellent. I've been continuing to remind everyone on these webinars that we've been doing for the last 4 weeks now. The vintage variation is almost a perk. It's we
mhm,
have a cool climate, right? I think so. So what I've been throwing around is you have the New York State motto: if you could make it here, you could make it anywhere. And I changed it on my first slide for our first webinar to say, if you could make it here, then you should, right? Because it's a special place, because we have
yes.
exciting terroir that is expressed through our wines in a way that so few places in the east of the Americas really
Mhm,
can do. And so no, is it the easiest place? No, but you know what, Champagne's not an easy place to make wine either.
very true.
These days California has their share of issues as well,
Mhm,
and so I think winemaking in period, full stop, isn't for the faint of heart.
mhm.
And I think that we're not just throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. Pardon my French. I think that the people that are here to make wine know what they have, and I want the folks that are in the tasting rooms to know that they're putting something special in the glass for folks.
Mhm,
And so I always just like to drive that home. We've
absolutely.
got a great flight of wines for today, and so I chose these producers, specifically for a reason. You guys, for your kind of historical contribution in making sparkling wines so kind of early in this kind of what we call the kind of modern industry, along with folks like Herman J. Weimer that have been also making traditional method sparkling wines from Chardonnay and Pinot Noir since the 1980s, and their sparkling Riesling now also a mainstay of their production as well. And we're going to show that Riesling today, which is great. We've got Long Island's Sparkling Point Winery. This winery was built and dedicated exclusively to traditional method sparkling wines, and it was a huge investment. We'll hear from Christopher Tracy from Channing Daughters, and he notes that that you need space for method champenoise production. You need time. You need a pretty specific sales flow in order to kind of mitigate the time that it takes for these wines to develop. And so it's not for every winery to produce a traditional method, but Tom and Cynthia, who started Sparkling Point, I've got a great picture of them coming up. They wanted to focus on this, and they built a winery specifically for it. That kind of investment turns a lot of heads, right? That gets a lot of attention, and ultimately, Long Island sparkling wine has continued to see increased productions pretty much ever since. And then we've got Channing Daughters, right? So South Fork Winery, they've established themselves as pet net specialists. They're going to be our first wine of the flight, and they produce several unique cuvées every year. And then we're going to end with Nathan Kendall's Chapika pet net, which he partnered in 2016 with sommelier Pascaline Lepeltier. She's a master som, best French sommelier in 2018, always top of the ranks, and she's just a delight. And they've been also just making waves with these wines. They're always very well received, and so thrilled to kind of end on that, which is kind of fun and funky and different. And so we're going to go into our first wine, which is the Channing Daughters Rosado Merlot Pet Nat. We are getting our Merlot grapes 100% from the North Fork of Long Island, and this is the 2021 vintage at 10.5%. I am going to share a video with everyone now. We're going to hear from Christopher. Got to spend some time with him. Gosh, we did this video probably about 2 years ago, but he is always just so much fun to hear him talk about his winemaking. And so let me get that going for us. Sorry, it's hidden. Here we are. Share my screen. Wasting time, Dan. Here we go. Share sound. Okay. Can everybody see this one? Megan, can I get a thumbs up? Can you see my my video screen? Thank you.
love pet nats here. It's something that our region does really well. I don't really have the space to make traditional methods, so we went down the method ancestral route to make these pet nats, and we make anywhere between 4 and 8 of them every year. And we're even making some now besides like the Merlot or the Gewürztraminer or the Bianco, which is a blend of 3 different grapes. We're making ones from some native hybrid grapes like Delaware and Diamond, so we have those. And we also make one from a shard cider or a hard cider in a pet nat form from some apples from our friends down the street at the Milk Pail and our Chardonnay. They're wild, ambient, spontaneous fermentations, whatever word you'd like to call them, but that means we don't add yeast. It's just the ambient yeast in the air, on the grapes that we find all around us. So the juice goes in there, usually starts fermenting within a couple days, and more often than not, those pet nats get bottled within a couple of weeks. This one's already been going for a month plus, but we've had some cool nights, so yeah, it's been a little bit cold, so it's a nice, slow, cool, very aromatic ferment. But it's almost done, and we'll probably start prepping it for bottling later this afternoon and probably bottle it tomorrow morning. So this is 100% Merlot, harvested from the North Fork. Same fruit basically that we use for our rosé. So hand harvested, whole cluster press in the press over there, pressed to about 1.7 atmospheres. We take the clearest juice off the top of the tank as it settles, and we'll put it into a stainless steel tank for fermentation for the pet nat. That tank over there actually has the Rosado Merlot 2021 in it right now. So that's fermenting in the last one of our pet nats for this year to bottle. So Rosado Pétillant Naturel, which means that it finishes its ferment and bottle, and that's where we get the bubbles. So different than traditional method or method champenoise, which are the same thing. Ferment is in there. Once it gets down to the sugar level that we want, that's going to provide the amount of carbonation that we want, we bottle it in the bottle, and it finishes fermentation in this bottle, and it's trapped under a crown cap. CO2 dissolves into solution, and we have a sparkling wine. So we like to make sure these have been standing up straight. We don't disgorge them. If they're nice and cool too, then they open pretty well without bubbling over, and we've tried to really have that be consistent across the board. The wines are pretty dry. They're the only wines that we do make with a little bit of residual sugar, but they're still really on the dry side. But the pet nats often do have a touch of RS in them. So beautiful mousse, great bubbles, great texture. Again, that kind of watermelon, cherry, raspberry flavors, super delicious. Only 10-ish% alcohol, so you can start drinking this with brunch. A lot of things you can do with this, from cheeses and salads or grilled foods through, I mean, you know, it's just a happy wine, and it'll make you and your friends and your family happy when you drink it. So we love that.
I'm unmuted now. Fantastic. I mean, you know, Chris did a really good job of introducing this wine in that video. You can't beat it. I think it, you know, it should be noted that pet nats, I think, are sometimes thought of as the easy road, right? But man, to get them precise, to get them clean, to get them at the right amount of pressure where you can open that bottle and not have it explode all over yourself, takes a lot of patience and skill. And so again, you know, sparkling winemaking, not for the faint of heart, but he's done a great job on this one. Megan, what do you think? I've got a lot of notes from Chris here. I'm going to just kind of try and pull out things that he didn't talk about, but I'd love your thoughts on the wine.
Sure. Yeah, I loved when he said this wine will make you happy. I was like, it makes me happy. You know, I think it's absolutely delightful. And sort of the mousse is very creamy. It has wonderful, like very like red, juicy fruit, you know, flavors coming through, bright acidity. It's very clean and very fruit forward. I just love it. I think it's wonderful. Very well made.
And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think, you know, another kind of thing, you know, if we're talking about folks in the tasting room presenting these wines, like, you know, this style, there is yeast in the bottle, right? That yeast is still active when it's bottled. That's how you're getting your carbonation. The bubbles, you know, are created in this bottle. And so it should be noted that a little bit of cloudiness or sediment is to be expected. It adds texture, it adds flavor, and those tartrate crystals aren't something to be scared about. I mean, you don't really, I don't want to chew my wine, but they are not by any sense a sign of a fault or an issue. It's quite again. So even in his notes, he's like, it's yummy and arguably good for you. And I'm like, my man, he's great. And so, again, a bit more on the kind of Pétillant Natural style. He just says sometimes that there is a bit less pressure than in a bottle of champagne. His contain just between 3 and 6 bars, whereas champagne and other sparkling wines will have about 6 bars. Pressure, that's 6 bars. That's more pressure in a bottle of champagne than you'd get in an average car tire. So it really is important to be careful when you're opening your sparkling wines. That cork can really do some damage if it lets loose. There is a video I put out for the New York Wine and Grape Foundation. Gosh, it was mid-pandemic, probably 2020, and I did a little just really cheesy, tacky video on sparkling wine and the varying ways you can open them. And I even sabered a bottle using a wine glass for that one. It was very messy. My wife was not pleased that I filmed that in my living room, but we got it done. We got it done for sure. And so, yeah, lovely wine. They will develop beautifully and develop autolysis like champagne because they are sitting on their lees. But generally speaking, we are expecting to drink these wines in their youth. I hope you love it. I mean, the color for me is also just such a turn on. Really, that kind of copper bronze. All his work with Merlot is just a lot of fun. So let's move on. All right, Megan, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think this is a fantastic sort of example of what, is possible with this style. And I agree with the color. I mean, it is hard to make a rosé, sparkling wine, but really hard to make a beautiful color rosé pet nat because it's really, you don't have any chance to go back to it and add a dosage or add something later, So I think it's a bold move and it paid off.
Yeah, and it's also an opportunity to show a different side of Merlot too. I mean,
Absolutely.
Long Island's known for Merlot,
Yes.
but this is a different take on it, right? And he's not afraid to put it into rosé, to put it into a rosé pet nat, and I think it's a great opportunity, especially because gosh, ever since that movie Sideways, Merlot's had an uphill battle. I happen to love Merlot in all of its forms. And so next we are moving on to our traditional method sparklings. We're starting with the Herman J. Weimer Extra Brut Riesling. This is the 2017 vintage, which is really fun because we have all 2017 vintages in this flight for our traditional method. So we're really talking about our different kind of grape blends and things like that. And so this one, 100% Riesling, ABV coming in at 12%. Megan, would you tell us just a bit more about the traditional method process versus what we were kind of going into with Pétillant Natural?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really interesting to see Christopher on the video because we're really starting out the same way. The fruit is typically hand harvested early, really capturing those high acidity levels, low sugar, but you want it to be ripe. You want the grapes actually to be ripe. It's just making sure that the acid and the sugar are in the right balance. So looking at like 18, 19 bricks, which is fairly low, when we think of still wine production. So hand harvest the Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, Riesling. We go then straight into the press. So Christopher was mentioning they skip the crusher step. They go straight into sort of a whole cluster press. And that's because you don't want any sort of bitterness or phenolics coming from the skins. The style, with the bubbles, all of the aromas come to the surface. So the good, bad, and the ugly, right? So you really have to be very careful. And particularly, for us, we're utilizing Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. You don't want any color also, coming from the skins. So basically hand harvested, press, and just using that first free run is very typical. We call it the cuvee. So basically the free run juice. We're then fermenting that in stainless steel with a champagne yeast strain. So this is where sort of the the processes diverge, because that's what Christopher exactly said. They're fermenting, in stainless steel, and then from there he would bottle, and let the fermentation continue. Whereas we would basically, after a few months, we have, a dry, like 10% alcohol base wine that's very high acid and very dry. And we bottle on our bottling line. We're actually this week, we're bottling um, our sparkling wines from the 2022 vintage. So it's very fitting. So basically, bottling in this very thick glass with this deep punt, and the base wine is bottled. We put in a little bit of yeast, a little bit of sugar, and then seal it with a crown cap. And that's going to ignite the secondary fermentation, which takes a few months to complete. And basically, you have the yeast, that's done its job during the secondary fermentation and sort of falls out of solution. And that is an important part of the traditional method process, because you have this sort of this wine that's gone through 2 fermentations, and you have this sort of cloudy sediment. And the next stage is sort of the yeast autolysis stage, where you're sort of marrying the wine with the dead yeast cells. And that process takes many years. It depends on the style that you want to accomplish. For us, we're a year to 10 years, depending on which wine, we're producing. We still have some very old things undisgorged just to see. But that is an important piece. And then, of course, instead of leaving it in the bottle, we actually remove the dead yeast cells. So first we have to riddle. So basically the yeast are going to swing down like a pendulum into the neck, and then that neck can be frozen, typically with a propylene glycol basin. Just the yeast plug is frozen, and then it can be removed by a process called disgorging. So we remove the yeast plug, typically top with a little bit of dosage, sort of the last step in the wine's progression. And that's, for us, usually a younger sparkling wine to add some freshness, but it could be a still wine. It could be, a variety of different sort of reserve wines, and then corked, wire hood. The bottles are washed, labeled, and then we like to see about 3 months on dosage on that reserve wine before release. So, and then on our bottles, and I think Weimer as well, maybe
Yes.
Sparkling Point too, they have the disgorging month and year, which is a really important piece. When you look at 2017, the grapes were harvested, but it was disgorged in 2021. So I think that's an important key step. But that's basically, in a nutshell, quick process.
Yeah, and I think I'm listening to you kind of go through, and I'm seeing the expenses rack up in my brain. Right, so you have
Yes,
this,
it is
you
an
have to
expensive method.
freeze the neck of the bottle for the riddling process. You have the time it takes to riddle those wines, and I mean, it's really just someone popping bottles all day long, and trying to do that in a way that actually you don't want to lose a lot of wine in that process. And so if you haven't watched a riddling video, find something on YouTube and check it out. Because it's quite fun. When I was in the Finger Lakes just last month, Julia at Hosmer Winery disgorged a bottle of sparkling wine for us, and I lost a shirt that day because it was a red sparkling wine, and so of course that was the day I chose to wear white. You add on to that, you add on the real estate that it takes, right, for sitting on these wines as much as 10 years. You're essentially, it's rent, right? You've got your closures, you've got your capsules, you've got your cages, you've got the heavy glass. That those bottles are just plain simple more expensive, and I want to touch on that again a bit later. But again, it's not for every winery to make traditional method wines, but when you can, the results are really beautiful. And so we've got a beautiful wine in the glass here for sure. I'm getting gosh, I mean, it's definitively Riesling, right? I get Riesling right on the nose, right? It's Riesling, but it's got a lot of other character from that autolysis, from that yeast. This wine was bottled in October of 2018. So that's a year essentially after harvest, and then disgorged in February 2022. So a little over 3 years later on the lees. 1.6% residual sugar, which is kind of just really bang on for this wine. I think it's just perfect. Lemon curd, yellow apple. Yeah, the acid's great. Really full, kind of mouth feel from the roof of your mouth on down. Those bubbles fill up every kind of nook and cranny in a really wonderfully textural way. And I think that Riesling, Riesling Brut, the Germans would call it Sekt, S-E-K-T, I think is a great kind of way that the Finger Lakes is growing in terms of their sparkling wine production. I think we're seeing more of that. I think we're seeing more of them take the spotlight. I think this is just a gorgeous wine. And Megan, you guys produce Riesling bubbles as well. And I imagine it's gotta fly. I mean, it's gotta go right off the shelves.
Yeah, it is actually our most popular
Yeah.
sparkling that we do. But yeah, I mean, Herman Weimer, an icon producer, for Riesling, but also for traditional method sparkling. They've been doing it a very long time, and they have really wonderful selections. I think this is a great example of what's possible, with Riesling, having that little bit of autolytic, character, the pastry, the dough, crustiness, the Riesling character, like you mentioned, Dan, the lemon curd, the lime, the apple, like comes through. That's a really beautiful wine.
I don't have it in my notes, but I'm pretty sure this is all single vineyard fruit as well. This is
Hmm.
estate
Could be, yeah.
HJW vineyard. And so again, just another opportunity for kind of specificity, terroir specific specificity for these wines. And it's great. Yeah. I pulled when winemakers give pairing suggestions. I've obviously spent a lot of time just pairing wines with cheeses and foods and things. And Good Wine, Good People, my retail website in the UK also has good pairings. And so we have categories for pizza and pasta, meat and barbecue, Asian cuisine, cheeses, and gosh, another one that I'm not going to think about, but off the top of my head. But I think, these pairing tips are always really important. And so Weimer is recommending soft, mild cheeses. I think the acidity on this can really go for some like full fat triple cream cheeses would be just beautiful. And then they say seared scallops. And I'm like, oh, that sounds good. And for me, for that Channing Daughters, for the first wine, I mean, that's a pizza wine for sure. But I also think it's got just great applications with also Long Island seafood, right? Your local seafood bounty that you're going to have there. You look at that color and I immediately think salmon. And so you've got the acidity for that richer fish. And so, don't ever, don't forget that with all of New York State wines, but particularly with our sparklings, these are wines that are wonderful for a celebration on their own, but also at the dinner table as well, or at, brunch or lunch. I think even Chris said brunch. And I was like, yeah, that's perfect, right? That's a good brunch wine with some hollandaise on like a little eggs Benedict. Take my money. Fantastic. Fantastic. Let's keep going. We've got a few more still. I want to stay on track. And again, if anyone has questions for myself or for Megan, we'll try and save some time at the end for Q&A. So don't hesitate to jump into the chat box or the Q&A box. And if it's something that we don't get to answer now or don't have all the information available, we'll certainly be sure to follow up with you and get that to you. So please don't hesitate. I'm going to take one more sip of this before we move on. But fantastic. Okay, so we are now moving back to Long Island, and we have sparkling points, Blanc de Blanc. And so Blanc de Blanc means white of white. And so this is the traditional kind of champagne term for a sparkling wine using 100% Chardonnay. And that's what these guys do here. Again, you've got Cynthia and Tom there on the image. Again, their story is all about how much they love bubbles, and then recognizing the potential for bubbles out on Long Island, and making really impactful investment. And so I just think that's an important part of the story for these guys as well. The winemaker is French. His name is Gilles Martin. I got the pleasure of meeting him last month. He is also the winemaker for McCall Winery and a few others. He's a popular guy because he's really talented, and so he's making their sparkling wines. Again, our Blanc de Blanc, 100% Chardonnay. We have the 2017 vintage, 12.5% alcohol, 6 grams per liter of dosage, 3 years on the lees, and this one was disgorged on April 15th of 2021. So probably about the same. You'll probably be, after harvest, 6 months to a year before bottled, and then we're looking at again 36 months in our on the lees. And so yeah, let's get in there, give it a smell. It's different. It's a very different wine. You get a lot more of that kind of autolytic, leesy, yeasty, brioche toast. God, it's really showing well. And this is also for me. We did open this last night. It was my parents' 41st anniversary, and I wanted to share a little bit of some bubbles with them on their anniversary. So I opened this one last night, and it did not disappoint. It was quite lovely.
Yeah, something I'm noticing, it's like honeycomb, like fresh honeycomb and melon and like apricot. Like you're getting some kind of stone fruits in there on the nose, but definitely very autolytic. The pastry and the brioche, and
yeah,
it's really beautiful.
There's richness, that dosage, that a little bit of RS that you're going to bring to the wine does wonders for filling out the kind of mouthfeel, but also unlocking a lot of just great flavors and fruit characteristic. Right, it's very similar to what we discussed with our Rieslings 2 weeks ago. Is that residual sugar when it's balanced with the acidity, right? And we're starting similar to Riesling, our sparkling wine, starting with a lot of acid, right? And so that balance of RS is quite important to unlock that mid palate and get you those kind of broader, wide fruit characteristics that people just go crazy for. It's yeah.
Very nice. And I know these guys, they've won, for the New York Wine Classic, they've won Best Sparkling Wine many, many times. Like they're really, a classic sort of traditional method producer in the state. So really fine example of what they do.
Hell of a wine to blind the blind.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, yeah. I've got a bottle or two in the UK, and it's a great one to break out. I've done it before with the Weimer extra brut as well. And it's immediately, it's German sect. It must be, right? And so these are a lot of fun. And so cheers, Tom and Cynthia.
Yes.
Fantastic. How we doing? Oh, looking good on time. I love it. All right. Fantastic. Megan.
Yes.
You're up.
Okay, here we go. We have our 2017. So it's really, I like what you said earlier, Dan, that all the traditional methods are from the same vintage. We're talking different lakes. We're on Keuka Lake, Herman Weimer's on Seneca Lake, and obviously Sparkling Point's on Long Island, but all coming from the same year, which is really neat. So 2018 Blanc de Noir. So we have, Pinot Noir, 100% Pinot Noir here.
17?
Oh, I'm so sorry. 17. 17. Yeah, 2017. As I talk about how they're all from the same vintage and say 2018. 2017 Blanc de Noir, 100% Pinot Noir. And I was mentioning before how it's so important to have no contact, with the juice and the skins. This is the reason, right? Because we're, producing a sparkling wine made from red grapes, but with no contact. So you don't want any color or any kind of bitterness or phenolics, from the skin. So taking great care that we have, the juice separate and it's just the cuvee, juice fermented, and then bottling that for the secondary fermentation. But this style is typically, it's a richer style just because it is 100% Pinot Noir. So we talk about it like, the Blanc de Noir is a great like winter sparkling. The Blanc de Blanc is like fresh and very elegant, maybe great for other seasons. But this has, because it has, those red grapes, definitely has, a bit of a fuller mouthfeel. And with pairing, I think you can go with richer foods. I've done wine dinners where we do the whole, sparkling portfolio, and, this could be with, a filet mignon, like you could do it, a well-prepared, meat dish. So Sparkling wine definitely can take you through the entire meal, and it doesn't always have to be sort of the aperitif or, for dessert. So,
Preach.
but yeah, so this, yeah, right. This one is dosed at 8 grams, so a slightly higher dosage than the sparkling point, but probably a higher acidity. So we were really looking to balance that acidity, as you mentioned, Dan. It's important to, make sure that is within balance. It's harmonious so that it doesn't really stick out. We do some Brut Nature styles as well for those that are really interested in some high acidity, which are very refreshing and have their, plethora of foods that you can work with for those. But this is our Blanc de Noir, again, 2017, which was a really classic vintage for the Finger Lakes. It was a pretty cool sort of year. We had nothing that kind of strikes me as really that really stands out in terms of a lot of rain or a lot of sun. It was a pretty classic vintage. So I think it's quite interesting to be able to taste this now. So yeah.
Yeah, and I have disgorged in December of 2021 on my bottle here, at least, right? And do you guys disgorge the whole vintage at the same time?
No, actually. So our sparkling winemaker, Eric Bauman, this will be his 18th vintage, I think. So he's, part of the family, and he has previous experience in California working for Jay in Sonoma. So long history producing traditional method sparkling. No, he disgorges every month, even during harvest, every month of every year. So it could constant disgorgement. And that's why it's really important to have the month and year, on the back label.
Yeah, I think that's another great selling point. You're getting, like, again, even more specificity and unique qualities from again, wines, same vintage, but disgorged at different points.
Yes,
you get different results, right? And so it's
absolutely.
always exciting to kind of return to. Blanc de Noir, we're talking white of black. And so you can work with a Blanc de Noir that has other red grapes in it. Particularly, we're talking Pinot Meunier. And so do you guys always do your Blanc de Noir as 100% Pinot?
It's sometimes 95% Pinot Noir, 5% Pinot Meunier, or 90% Pinot Noir, 10% Pinot Meunier. So it really depends on the vintage. Pinot Meunier can be affected by winter damage. So it depends, like, what what the next harvest brings. But it is sort of nice to have a little bit of Pinot Meunier because it gives like a floral note to the finished wine. But it really depends on the year for us. And we are working with Pinot Meunier in our Célèbre Rosé as well. So that's Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. And as well with our Brut. So again, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier blend. So it is in a few of our wines.
And so, assuming those grapes are surviving our winter, we're looking at again, you're looking for floral kind of aromatics coming from the Pinot Meunier. It's not a grape that people are particularly well versed with.
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of seek it out. I think it's just a really interesting grape because I like to always, when we're taking something that everyone knows it is one thing and doing something else with it. And so on the retail side, I have fully fledged red wine Pinot Meuniers.
Mm-hmm.
On there, I have Pinot Meunier sparkling, where it's 100% Pinot Meunier, and so usually a bit player. What else? What other kind of characteristics of this grape could you tell us about it?
Yeah, so I mean, the name is really interesting too. So I don't know if anyone if you speak French, Dan. I do not, but Meunier, translates to miller. So when you're in a vineyard, I love it. When you're in a vineyard, and we actually have our sparkling vineyard is right next to our production facility, and it's Pinot Noir, and then there's a row of Pinot Meunier. And so you can really clearly see the difference, but it looks very similar to Pinot Noir with a tighter cluster. But if you turn over the underside of the leaf, there's a white fuzz on the underside of the leaf. And it's meant to, be like a miller, like you're working with flour, and a miller just like slapped the underside of the leaf, and now it looks like it has flour on it. So that's a key differentiation, in terms of just the appearance, of the vine. But in terms of it's obviously extremely prevalent in Champagne. I think it's the second most widely planted grape, in Champagne, even though it's really rarely talked about on its own. And there has been this big movement with grower champagne houses working with, Pinot Meunier forward blends. And, we're releasing for the first time 100% Pinot Meunier Brut Nature, which is going to be really interesting. So I think that there's a lot of value with this variety, and it has a lot of aromatic potential. And it does add something really beautiful to the blend. Another interesting sort of differentiation that we do very little barrel fermentation or malolactic fermentation in the base wine. So you can see in the final wine, for this Blanc de Noir, for instance, 5% was barrel fermented of the Pinot Noir, so tiny amount, and only that 5% went through malolactic fermentation. So you're really getting all of that freshness, that malic acid is still there, and that's, I think, really contributes to that very fresh and very elegant style. And it's really always been part of our winemaking philosophy.
And a lovely, just kind of clear expression of the fruit too, right?
Mhm.
You're not getting in the way particularly. All right, we've got just enough time for one more wine. That's how it goes. And so we will move on to the last one of our flight, back to our Pétillant Natural style here, our Pet Nat. I should note that, our tank method sparkling wines and even our forced carbonated sparkling wines are important styles for many of our New York State producers due to those production methods really just being a little more straightforward, a little less time consuming, and a little less costly. You're getting a really wonderful, from a value perspective, introduction to the big wide world of sparkling wines in New York State. And so we actually will start next week's hybrids and natives course with a forced carbonated sparkling hybrid wine, which I'm looking forward to. And so not to kind of discredit those styles in any way. I think they're very important. I think there's not a lot of facilities around that that have the capabilities for forced carbonation, but they are likely, you can find them in the regions. And so the producers that take advantage of those are making great stuff that is just kind of joyous and fun and easy. And so, yeah, we've got our last one is the Chapika, our Catawba Pet Nat, Finger Lakes vintage 2021, sessionable 10% alcohol. I absolutely love it. Let's pop it open. See?
Oh my.
It's all right.
Yeah, I did it over a little trash can, so I was safe.
Right. I might have to wait a second on that one.
Yeah.
Otherwise I'm gonna make a big mess. You have a glass, Megan?
I do. Yeah. This is my first experience with the 2021 vintage. I've tried previous vintages, and yeah, it's really, as you said, like really fresh, with the 10% alcohol. Very fruit forward. You get a lot of the sort of Catawba, essence. But yeah, it's lovely. And I mean, Nathan is a very talented winemaker. Pascaline is, also very talented. So the combination of the two, they're like a force to be reckoned with. And I know this wine has made it, all over the world, which is really exciting. And it's really awesome to get the word out, about this wine. So
Yeah. I had the pleasure. Oh, go ahead, please.
Oh yeah, I know that they're doing a lot in the vineyard too. I mean, obviously this photo of Nathan in the vineyard, but they're farming it very sustainably, and it's really part of the mission of this wine. So
I saw this image on their website, and I said this vineyard
this is it.
Going to stress people out, and I want to use it. That is
it does stress me out a little bit. Yeah,
that's the jungle right there for sure. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I had the pleasure of, I still can't get this open without it exploding, but I'll get there, I promise.
Yeah.
But I had the pleasure of showing this specific flight, basically the wines that I chose for the first 5 seminars. I also used them for filming a kind of scripted series that'll come out as soon as I finish editing. But we also showed these to some trade and media in London, and all of the sparkling wines did incredibly well, were incredibly well received. And there is a Jamie Good article on Wine Anorak that scores all 5 of these wines quite favorably. And so, again, really just another example to say that we are doing great things with our sparkling wines. Really quick, we're going to close it up. Always a shout out to our sustainability options, our sustainability efforts rather, in New York State, and the New York Wine and Grape Foundation Sustainability Program is an important kind of tenet of the mission. And so I encourage everyone to spend more time with those objectives, both in educating the consumers and improving their operations. And so I did want to get into kind of heavy glass and sparkling alternatives. I think it is the technology is improving, right, in terms of making glass that can handle this pressure. I'm not saying that to discredit any of the quality glass that we're using in today's flight, but just of note that there are very kind of well-regarded brands around the world that are pushing the boundaries in what we could do with glass from a carbon footprint perspective, just the weight in general. And then lastly, with kind of in closing, you know, these sparkling wines, they offer great value, right? You're going to compare the prices of these wines to champagne, and it's a no-brainer. These are just as good against any of the major champagne players, in my opinion, and we boast such a wide breadth of styles and varieties with the signature of New York's world-class cool climate. And so fresh, lively wines, moderate alcohol, lots of flavor. And so, you know, with the overwhelming majority of producers being small and family owned, you're getting an artisan product rooted in unique and fascinating terroir. And again, we talked about, you know, how specific and what a small snapshot these sparkling wines can be. And so we've got the rich history of sparkling wines. I think our future for sparkling wines is quite bright. It unites our diverse regions, right? There is premium sparkling wine being produced in all of our major AVAs, and that through line for New York State is also very important. We're working with different kinds of grapes, natives, hybrids, vinifera, tank method, pet nat, traditional method, bone dry, sweet and fruity. We've got it all. They're fantastic with food. There is literally something for every meal, occasion, and palate. Megan, I want to give you an opportunity, just if you have any other thoughts you want to add in closing. We did get a question that came through. I just want to address it super quick. Unfortunately, I don't have the answer, but I'm going to come back to Laura. You know, she just basically asked how the different growing seasons were in 2017. She says she's familiar with Finger Lakes and Cayuga, but not with the others. I don't have Long Island or particularly the Hudson Valley off the top of my head, but I can get that information. The most recent version of the New York Wine reference guide just launched on the website. So newyorkwines.org, you can download the reference guide that we penned last year, but I've been doing quarterly updates to the guide. And the last version, we added a 12-year vintage report for the Finger Lakes. And I intend to do that for Long Island next, hopefully the Hudson Valley after that, and so on and so forth. And so we're going to continue to build that kind of resource for everyone. And so I encourage you to check it out. But Laura, I will be in touch through the Wine and Grape Foundation soon. All right. Megan, just anything in closing? Thank you so much.
No, thank you, Dan.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I mean, this category of New York sparkling wines, it's on fire. Like, it's literally on fire, and it's not going anywhere. So I'm so happy to be able to, you know, talk about these wines, and I'm really, really excited. You know, this is Riesling for the Finger Lakes has been what we've hung our hat on, but sparkling wine, this is our next frontier, and tremendous growth potential, tremendous opportunity. The wines, I think, speak for themselves. And as you mentioned, Dan, a tremendous amount of diversity. So there's literally something for everybody, something for every meal, every occasion. And it's a really thrilling sort of category to be a part of. So, and thank you for all of your expertise today. And thank you everyone for being on this, on the Zoom. And I hope to see you all at the winery sometime. And thank you again, Dan.
Can't keep me away. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much. Thank you to the New York Wine and Grape Foundation for hosting this series. We're back next week with hybrids and natives, and then moving on to some of our AVA sessions. Looking forward to it. We will see you next week.